My name is Grace, I'm 34 years old, and the morning of my baby shower I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the venue my best friend had spent 3 months planning, 32 weeks pregnant, wearing a yellow dress I had bought specifically for that day, looking at a message on my phone that my husband had sent to the family group chat by mistake, a message that was meant for her. And I understood in the space of about 4 seconds that the life I thought I was living had been a different life entirely for the past 8 months. The message was 11 words, I'm not going to write them here, but 11 words was all it took, 11 words and a name and a particular tone that you only use with someone you have been intimate with for long enough that you have stopped being careful. Her name was the first word, the name I had been saying since I was 7 years old, the name of the person who had thrown me my bridal shower, who had held my hand when I had my first miscarriage, who had cried with me when I finally got pregnant, who was inside that building right now hanging streamers and arranging flowers and preparing to stand in a room full of people who loved me and smile. I sat in that car for 11 minutes, I know because I watched the clock, and then I made 3 decisions. I was going to go inside, I was going to get through the day, and I was going to do what came next with the same precision I brought to everything that mattered in my life, completely and without leaving anything to chance. I checked my makeup in the mirror, I got out of the car, and I walked through the door. If you have ever had to smile through the worst day of your life because the moment wasn't right yet and you knew it, subscribe to Unspoken Truth, because what Grace did next took more strength than most people will ever be asked to find, and this story is just getting started. My name before I was Grace Whitfield was Grace Okafor. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, the second of 3 children of Nigerian immigrants who had built something careful and deliberate in a country that had not made it easy. My father was an engineer, my mother was a pharmacist, and they had raised us with the particular combination of warmth and high expectation that exists in families who understand that excellence is not optional when the margin for error is smaller than it is for other people. I was quiet and observant as a child, the kind of person who watched a room before entering it, who took time before trusting but trusted completely once I had decided. I had 2 close friends in the way that some people have 2 close friends instead of many, relationships that went all the way down instead of spreading wide, and one of those friends was Serena. Serena Mitchell and I met in 2nd grade when we were both assigned to the same reading group and discovered that we had each brought the same book from home, a battered paperback copy of a chapter book our respective mothers had bought at the same library sale without knowing each other. We looked at the matching books and then at each other, and something clicked in the particular instantaneous way of childhood friendships that become the architecture of your life before you're old enough to understand what you're building. We were inseparable for 26 years, through middle school and high school and college, through bad boyfriends and worse haircuts, through my father's illness and her parents' divorce, through my first job and her cross-country move to Los Angeles and back, through every version of ourselves we had been on the way to becoming who we were. Serena was the person I called first for everything, before my mother, before my sisters, before anyone. She was the first person I told when I met Daniel, the first person I called when he proposed, the maid of honor at my wedding, the person who sat with me in the hospital bathroom at 2 in the morning after my miscarriage and didn't say anything because she understood that there was nothing to say. I trusted her the way you trust something you have never had reason to question, completely and without inspection, the way you trust the floor under your feet. I met Daniel Whitfield at a work conference in Charlotte when I was 29, he was 32, a financial analyst with the kind of steadiness that felt like safety and the kind of humor that made rooms lighter. We dated for 2 years and married at 31 in a ceremony that Serena helped plan down to the centerpieces and the playlist and the specific shade of white on the tablecloths. She gave a speech at the reception that made everyone cry including Daniel. She talked about what it meant to watch your best friend find the person who deserved her, and she said it with the conviction of someone who meant every word. I believed she meant every word. I still believe she meant it then. What I don't know and will probably never know is exactly when meaning it stopped being enough. The first 2 years of our marriage were good, genuinely good. Daniel was present and affectionate and the kind of husband who noticed things, who showed up, who remembered what mattered to you and acted on it without being reminded. We bought a house in Buckhead, we talked about children, we built a life that felt solid in the way that lives feel solid when they are constructed on foundations you have reason to trust. Serena was part of our life the way she had always been part of my life: dinners, weekend trips, the constant low hum of friendship that exists when someone has been in your orbit long enough that their presence is simply part of the texture of your days. She and Daniel got along well. They had the easy rapport of two people who loved the same person and found each other genuinely likable as a result. I had thought that was a gift. Having the two most important people in my life exist comfortably in the same space. I have thought about that comfort many times since the parking lot. I got pregnant at 33 after 8 months of trying. The positive test came on a Tuesday morning in October and I called Serena before I had even told Daniel. I called her from the bathroom with the test still in my hand because she was the first call. She had always been the first call. She screamed in the way she had been screaming about good news since second grade, and I laughed and cried simultaneously, and she said, "I'm coming over tonight, I'm bringing champagne for Daniel and sparkling water for you, and we are celebrating." She came over that night and we sat in my kitchen and Daniel opened the champagne and Serena raised her glass and said, "To Grace, who deserves every single thing that is coming," and Daniel put his arm around me and I thought, this is exactly what a life is supposed to feel like. I was 32 weeks pregnant when I found the message. 8 months, the math arrived quietly and settled. 8 months, the pregnancy was 8 months old. Serena had been at every appointment she could attend, had thrown me a small celebration when we passed the 12-week mark, had sent weekly messages asking how I was feeling, had spent 3 months planning a baby shower that 34 women were currently driving toward a venue in Buckhead where she was inside hanging yellow streamers because yellow was what I had asked for when I didn't yet know the baby's sex. 8 months, I sat in the parking lot and did the math and let it be what it was. I want to tell you what it is like to walk into a room full of people who love you when you are carrying something that would stop the room completely if you said it out loud. It is one of the most disorienting experiences of my life. The room was beautiful, yellow and white and full of the particular warmth of women who had gathered to celebrate something. My mother was there, my sisters, Daniel's mother, colleagues, friends from different chapters of my life all assembled in one space, and Serena was at the center of it, wearing a green dress I had never seen before, her hair the way she wore it when she wanted to look her best, moving through the room with the ease of someone in her element. She saw me come in and her face did what her face always did when she saw me. It opened, warm and immediate and completely familiar. She crossed the room and hugged me and said, "You look so beautiful," and her perfume was the same perfume she had been wearing since college, and I hugged her back because I was going to get through this day and I was not going to let 32 weeks of pregnancy and 11 words on a phone screen and 8 months of arithmetic make me fall apart in a room full of people who had no idea what was happening. I got through the party, I opened gifts, I laughed at the right moments. I cried at the card my mother wrote because the emotion in it was real regardless of everything else. I ate the food Serena had ordered from the restaurant I loved. I sat in the chair she had decorated and let people take photos, and I smiled in every single one of them because my daughter was going to see those photos someday and I wanted her to see her mother holding it together. Serena gave a speech, of course she did, she was the host. She talked about our friendship, about what it meant to watch me become a mother, about the kind of woman my daughter was lucky to be born to, and I sat in that chair and I listened and I thought about 7-year-olds with matching books and hospital bathrooms and the wedding speech, and I thought, I knew you completely, and I let myself feel all of that before I put it somewhere that wasn't this room. The party ended at 4 in the afternoon. People filtered out slowly the way people do when an event has been warm enough that nobody wants to be the first to leave. Serena stayed to help clean up. Of course she stayed to help clean up. Serena always stayed to help clean up. It was one of the things I had loved about her for 26 years. I stayed too. I helped fold tablecloths and collect gift bags and do the particular quiet work of dismantling something beautiful after it has served its purpose. And Serena and I worked side by side in the emptying room the way we had worked side by side in every space we had ever shared. comfortable and easy and completely familiar, and I didn't say a word about the parking lot. Not yet. I told Daniel that evening. I waited until we were home and the gifts were inside and the day was officially over, and then I sat across from him at the kitchen table and I placed my phone between us with the message on the screen and I watched his face. I have watched a lot of faces in this story. It is one of the things you do when you are the kind of person who observes before entering, and what I saw on Daniel's face in that moment was not the face of a man caught by surprise, it was the face of a man who had been waiting for this, who had known somewhere that it was coming, who had perhaps even felt a particular relief when it finally arrived. The way people feel relief when the thing they have been dreading is finally in the room, because the dreading is sometimes worse than the thing itself. He didn't try to explain it away, I will give him that. He looked at the phone and then at me and he said, "I'm sorry," and then he said her name, and then he said "I'm sorry" again, and it landed with the weight of something that had been held for a long time and was now finally being set down. I asked him how long, he told me 8 months, I asked him how it started, he told me, I asked him if he loved her, he was quiet for a long time before he answered, and the length of that silence was its own answer. I nodded, I stood up, I walked to our bedroom, I called my sister Adiz and told her I needed her to come and she was there in 40 minutes. I did not call Serena. The next 2 weeks were the most deliberate of my life. I was 32 weeks pregnant and navigating the end of my marriage and the end of my oldest friendship simultaneously, and I made a decision very early in those 2 weeks that I was going to do this correctly because my daughter was coming into the world in 8 weeks, and the foundation I built in those 8 weeks was the foundation she was going to be born into, and I was not going to let rage or grief or the understandable desire to burn everything down make that foundation unstable. I called a family attorney named Patricia Osei, who came recommended by my mother's friend and who turned out to be exactly the kind of lawyer I needed, direct and thorough and completely free of sentimentality about what needed to happen. She walked me through everything: assets, the house, what a separation before the birth would mean practically and legally, what my options were. I left her office with a clarity I had not had walking in. I also did something else. I thought carefully about Serena. Not about what she had done, I had thought about that enough. I thought about what I wanted from the moment when I finally said something to her. I thought about 26 years of genuine friendship and the ways it had been real before it was betrayed, and I thought about what truth looked like in a situation where 2 things were simultaneously true. She had been my closest friend and she had done something unforgivable, and I wanted to say both of those things clearly rather than letting the second one erase everything that came before. I called her on a Thursday afternoon 2 weeks after the baby shower. I asked her to come over. I told her we needed to talk, and the quality of her silence on the phone told me that she had been expecting this call and dreading it, and perhaps in some part of herself that she had been trying not to look at, needing it. She arrived at 6 in the evening. She was wearing the green dress again, which told me she had dressed carefully, and I understood that she was trying to show up as her best self for whatever was coming. I let her in. I offered her water, which she accepted with shaking hands, and we sat across from each other at the kitchen table where I had sat with Daniel 2 weeks earlier. I placed my phone between us the same way I had placed it with Daniel, the message on the screen, her name at the beginning of it. She looked at it for a long time without speaking. I watched her face move through something complicated and then settle into something I had not expected, not defensiveness, not deflection, something quieter and more broken. She looked up at me and her eyes were full and she said, "I'm so sorry, Grace," and the way she said it told me that the sorry was real and also that real sorry cannot undo 8 months, and I think she knew that too. I want to tell you what I said to her because I have thought about it a lot since, and I believe I said the right thing. I said, "I know you're sorry, I believe that you're sorry, and I need you to understand something clearly. What you did didn't just betray my marriage, it betrayed 26 years, it betrayed every hard thing we sat through together, it betrayed the version of me that called you first for everything, and that is a different kind of loss than the marriage, and I need you to understand both of them separately." She was crying openly by then, not performing, genuinely undone in the way of someone who has finally allowed themselves to be undone, and I sat across from her and I felt grief that was real and uncomplicated, grief for a friendship that had been the longest relationship of my life, grief for the 7-year-olds with matching books, grief for the thing that had been true before it wasn't. "I'm not going to ask you to leave my life today," I said, "because this friendship meant something and I'm not going to pretend it didn't, but I need time, a lot of time, and I need you to give it to me without asking for anything in return, no explanation, no timeline, no requests for forgiveness on any schedule except mine." She nodded, she wiped her face, she said, "Whatever you need," and I heard in that phrase an echo of something my mother had once said to me, for words that meant something different than the 4 words I had been given by other people in other stories, and I let that be what it was. She left at 8. I stood at the window and watched her car until it turned the corner, and then I sat on my couch with my hands on my stomach and felt my daughter move, a long slow roll that she had been doing in the evenings for weeks, and I talked to her the way I had been talking to her since I was 12 weeks along, just telling her things, the truth of what was happening and what I was doing about it and what I was building for her. My daughter was born on a Tuesday in January, 7 pounds and 4 ounces, a full head of dark hair, and the particular loud certainty of someone who had arrived and intended to make that known. My mother was in the room, my sister Adiz was in the room, Daniel was in the room because we had agreed that whatever was happening between us, he was her father and he was going to be present for the beginning of her life. I named her Amara. It means grace in Igbo, my mother's language, a name that held both of us. Daniel and I separated formally 2 months after Amara was born. The process was handled by Patricia Osei with the thoroughness I had come to expect from her. The house was sold, assets were divided, a co-parenting agreement was established that was fair and specific and built around what Amara needed rather than what either of us wanted. Daniel is a present father, he shows up on time, he loves her without qualification, and I have chosen to let that be what it is rather than let my grief about everything else diminish the thing that matters most, which is that Amara has 2 parents who are going to show up for her. Serena and I have not spoken since that Thursday evening. She sent a gift when Amara was born, a small stuffed elephant because she knew I had loved elephants since we were children. I put it in Amara's room. I have not decided yet what I am going to do about that friendship, and I am not going to rush the decision because I have learned in the past year that the most important decisions deserve the time they need and not a minute less. What I know is this: I built something in those 8 weeks between the parking lot and Amara's birth that I am proud of, not the confrontations, not the legal process, not any of the external things. I built a foundation, steady and clear and completely mine, and my daughter was born into it and she is going to grow up in it and it is going to hold. If you are somewhere right now holding something enormous and smiling through it because the moment isn't right yet, I want you to tell you that the strength that takes is real. It is not performance, it is not pretending, it is the particular courage of a person who has decided that they are going to do this correctly and completely on their own terms regardless of what it costs them in the short term. You are allowed to feel everything and still make good decisions. You are allowed to grieve a friendship and still hold someone accountable. You are allowed to be furious and still be precise. Those things are not opposites. They are what it looks like when a person who knows their own worth decides to protect it. The 11 words on that phone screen were the end of something, yes, but they were also the beginning of something, the beginning of a life built entirely on what is actually true rather than what I had been told was true, and my daughter is growing up in that life, in the truth of it, and that is worth every hard thing it cost to build. My name is Grace, I'm 34 years old, and on Tuesday evenings my daughter does a long slow roll that tells me she is settling in for the night. I put my hand on my stomach. I tell her things, the true ones, all of them. That is the only kind of story I know how to tell her now. Thank you for listening, take care of yourself, and if no one has told you lately that getting through the day is sometimes the bravest thing you can do, I'm telling you now.